I only read a fragment of the story, and I text Oli and I said, mate, I've just read this story. I won't spoil the end because I read it in the museum, if you like, in Exmouth, and I cried at the end. And I know, speaking to some of the guys who are very close with the SAS, that a lot of the SAS guys know this story well and have mad respect for it, because the mission length, not just the depth of the mission, the challenge of the mission and the risk, but the length is psychotic.
All right, Rusty, Oli, welcome to the Range Project.
Thanks, boys.
Thank you.
So, Rusty, we're going to get onto this really, really exciting project that you guys are collaborating on very soon. But before we get onto that, let's start with Nero. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of Nero?
Yep.
And where it's at right now?
Yeah, for sure. It's an investment fund. So pretty generic in that sense, I suppose. Our job's simple. It's to generate returns for clients. That's it. And but we do that within the sort of the prism of natural resources. So metals and mining, these sorts of categories. None of the soft commodities. We don't do ag or anything like that. But yeah, basically our role is to generate returns through investment for clients within a singular pool of capital. In and around that space. And so, yeah, started it. I mean, I think if you're from WA, it's kind of in your blood. Like you can't not have some interface with metals and mining. So,
horse town.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a beautiful thing, right? Like I love that about the state. I love all the risk appetite and the entrepreneurialism and all of that sort of thing.
So how do you assess something that's going to be a good investment? Is it a people-based thing? Is it a numbers thing? How do you go through that process?
It's all of the above. So yeah, for us, we're a boutique fund, so we deliberately manage probably a far smaller pool of capital than we could. We've had a lot of requests for inflows, which we've politely declined. We're really focused on returns. To do that, we're very value driven. And so there's a lot of sort of discipline around the process. And that means in our case, we run a top-down process, which is sort of your macro view and then your commodity research. So it's sort of like, macroeconomics, what's happening in the world, what are the big things that are driving commodity demand or supply? And then within that lens, you're saying, well, we sort of like these commodities from this point in time and this price point, and then we're hunting for opportunities within that framework, and then going bottom up, which is like a lot of technical due diligence. Now the irony is, as we've gotten bigger, we've invested more in the bigger cap stocks. They actually require less work than a small cap single asset company. So the work that you do bottom up in a small cap is pretty significant. You've got to do a lot of work on management. You've got to meet management, walk through the technicals with them, assess whether or not.
So do you have technical people that will go through that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm the least smart person in my team. And so look, surround ourselves with incredible people. My fellow PM's an engineer. Our head analyst, Goldman Sachs Data Analytics, Professor Stefan Hagman, I've worked with for 15 years. He's the head of economic geology, director of the CET at UWA. He's probably one of the top 3 structural geologists in academia globally. He does all our hard rock DD, and Dougie Gendry does all our oil and gas DD. He's like 50 years nearly petrogeologist. So, yeah.
Right. So Warren Buffett, he's got what they call the Buffett ratio that a lot of people seem to think is really important. Is there a Rusty ratio, or could you give some sort of heuristics to the way you think about markets that, if I'm a Scotch student up and coming and I want to get into this game, is there, without revealing all your secrets?
No. I'm a completely open book, so no secrets my end. Say this to all the other buy side guys and girls out there as well. Like, we like sharing ideas. There's literally 1,000 companies to invest in this universe, just on the ASX alone kind of thing. So there's no shortage of places to put your capital. I like sharing ideas and workflows with people. We're not the smartest guys in the room. I don't think anyone is. I think it's interesting hearing different people from different angles doing work. So yeah, always happy to share. No real, simplistic golden rule. I gave this analogy once at a dinner I got asked to come to for some boys at Scotch. I don't think I got asked back after giving this analogy, but I'll give it again anyway. What we're doing and what you're doing in many parts of daily life, but in investment, you're looking at probabilistic estimations on uncertain things in the future. That's the reality. If you look at the sort of the fundamentals, I guess, of valuation, you look at things like discounted cash flows. Now, all of those cash flows are future facing. It's got nothing to do with what the company earned previously, albeit people use that as a reference point for extrapolation of the future, but it is about the future. So everything you're doing is about probabilistic estimation of future events or uncertainties. And the best analogy I can give is a bit like a horse race. So I know gambling's not a politically correct thing to do, but I have as much or more respect for a professional gambler, in inverted commas, because those guys fight a 5% headwind every time they invest, right? And they are investing. If they're doing it professionally, that is a fact. So in a horse race, for instance, 5% of that pool of capital comes out. So if you're on average, you're going to lose that 5% if you're right down the middle of performance. In an equity market, the average tailwind per annum type of thing is 8%. Markets tend to go up 7 or 8% per annum. So you can still look kind of smart if you're halfway in the middle. So the professional gambler, I think, is a good reference point. A horse race is an interesting reference point, and what you're looking for is mispriced risk return. Horse race is a great place as an analogy because it's singular. It's point A to point B, and point A is right before the light goes and the gates open and the bet you place, and point B is the post. All you're looking for is a horse that's running at 10-1, but on your analysis should be 4-1. Or a horse that might be 50-1, but on your analysis should be 20-1.
Kind of seems like there could be many pathways it could take, though, in this horse race.
Heaps. And you can have more than one bet. So it's not about picking the winner singularly. It's about finding the mispriced risk return. And if you do that time and time again, you will generate returns, and you will do that through losses. And this is the part that's important to understand. You don't get every bet right. You just get the risk return right. So you don't put everything you've got on one horse. That's the principle of sort of diversification and portfolios and all the rest of it. You spread those bets, and over time, the laws of probability will see you making money. And so that's sort of what we're trying to do. We're trying to find mispriced risk return, trying to find undervalued assets, and you tend to find them sort of further down the curve in terms of market cap because there's what they call information asymmetry. There's less coverage in the smaller caps.
So do you think you use your intuition in any way in this process, like a sense of like a gut feel at all, or you're essentially telling us that no, it's the analysis, the sort of hard, and it's all probabilistic, obviously, as you say.
Yeah.
But is there an intuitive side to all of this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have to do the analysis first. I think that's a starting point. You've got to do the work technically, analytically, put that in the model, etc. Then there's a whole range of stuff around it that isn't in the textbook and isn't in the model, and you can bang the table all you like all day long saying this company's worth X, but if it trades at Y, well, it's Y. You need to do the work first, but you then need to understand the rest of the dynamics in a market. And when young people sort of ask me, oh, hey, what should I study? And I'm doing a postdoc and this, and they're all very valuable and good things to do. But I always say to younger people, like, hey, look, the best advice I can give you is, do the commerce, do the maths, do the do that work, but go and study psychology. Go and understand human thinking, because we are super imperfect, and markets are a reflection of humans. That the textbooks assume perfect knowledge and they assume rational behavior, and humans often are anything but rational. We operate in herds and packs. We feel safe in the comfort of others. We don't like to swim against tides or be out on our own. That's something I think if I sort of self-reflect and look at myself, and when I look at, do I use instinct or whatever? Well, that's probably where my instinct, I suppose, kicks in. Is I like those things. I don't run away from being somewhere no one else is. I love being where no one else is.
Where did you get those insights? For risk?
Appetite for risk and appetite for going against the grain, going against the herd. Not blindly. You've got to go do the work, but as a starting point, that
as an instinct,
instinctively that intrigues me. I see something that's hated, unloved. I immediately look at that and go, okay, let's dig around here a bit more. Let's have a look. What do we got going on here? So, like, PGMs are a great example at the moment. Platinum group minerals. I won't go into it because I'm sure you got lots to ask about. But yeah, they're a really hated metal category, and to do with most of their applications in internal combustion engines, and so people think that there's a diminishing use case. But yeah, we've gone and done the work and have a view otherwise.
All right. We always seem to get to this question because it's such a topic of conversation at the moment. What role do you reckon AI is going to play in the future of markets, the future of the work you do? Do you think it's going to replace a chunk of what gets done out there in the work you do? Or do you think because of its intuitive nature perhaps, and all the stuff you just talked about, there's just a space that it's not going to be able to fill?
Yeah, I mean, AI, I'd say a few things. First of all, anything that replaces human jobs is a great thing. I think there's a lot of hysteria, a lot of politics that's run around this. And if you think about it, like, just really as a sort of snapshot, like advocating for us all to go and take a sickle and cut wheat purely because it requires more people makes no sense. The harvester is going to do that far more efficiently, right? So that's probably like the best analogy I can give for people when they think about AI or other technologies that replace jobs. It's a great thing. That means we're doing something more efficiently, and that's how humans develop greater standards of living. That's just an economic fundamental fact.
And free us up to do other things.
Other things, exactly. So you can use those capabilities and resources elsewhere. So that's a wonderful thing. So I think AI, I genuinely do think we're at a point of another industrial sort of revolution. It'd probably fit with, the internet and the evolution of digitization, all those sorts of things. They all kind of fit together. So it's another extension of that. The applications, I don't have my head yet where I know it will be in years to come. It's only a year old, this stuff. It's mind blowing what it's doing already. And if I think of it like being able to have an army of people in and around me analysing what I'm doing or my team are doing, and then feeding back into that, I think, that is powerful. So, yeah, I think it'll have a massive, massive role in investment. I don't think that means they're going to automate investment, and we've already done a lot of that. So in reality, like, there's a lot of algorithms and maths and the word AI, I mean, I'm still trying to work out exactly what is an AI and what isn't AI, and that sort of thing. So our sector's been doing this for a long time with maths and models and automated processes, etc. But again, I'll always come back to the fact that markets are human, and it's very hard to model humans and emotion and so AI will play a role in, I think, a lot of the analytics. So a lot of the analysis that gets done in finance could be done or supplemented by AI. There's no doubt about that. Now, then it comes to the part you asked earlier about instinct and the human side of it. So that won't go away.
Okay. And I don't know if you had a question there, Steve. But
I might be moving on unless you want to stay on that topic.
Well, I actually want to ask you to cast your mind back now. And before we start to hit you up, Ollie, with some questions, cast your mind back to your Scotch days. What are your most memorable moments, just for our Scotch community out there? And
Yep. First of all, I love my time at Scotch. I only got to do 2 years. I did my finishing years, 11 and 12 at Scotch. I was a boarder at Anderson, and I loved it. The biggest thing that sticks with me was coming to an environment. I came from a public school down south, and coming into an environment where learning was really celebrated. So it will sound very foreign, I think, to people at Scotch, but the school I was at, you were derided if you got good marks. You were given grief and labelled and stuff like that, which is a bizarre thing to do, but that's how it was. And whereas coming to Scotch, everybody celebrated achievement and being good at things, whether it was sport or whatever. And that part of it, really, I think, changed probably my life's journey and helped me a great deal. So yeah, that stuck with me. And all my best mates today are my mates from Scotch. That's my tightest, finest shiners.
So if I ask you to sort of think about or imagine you got total freedom to go back to Scotch now and knowing what you know now, and then you got total freedom to run an educational program and sort of infuse some of the things you've learned over the years, what would some of them be? How would you reimagine education to some extent?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting one. I would a few things. I would love to see more philosophy. So I would really work hard on bringing philosophy as a unit of study into school and into university. I have a strong belief that it should be part of any piece of paper that you get from university. Basically, you should
Did you
study.
prompt him for this one, Sam?
I teach philosophy, Rusty.
Do you? I didn't even know that. No,
Great.
So we never had a philosophy teacher, I don't think, when I was at Scotch. Not that I remember.
I imagine it wouldn't have been there. No.
No, so I'm a massive believer in asking questions. Philosophy to me is not so much about answers, it's about questions. And I think one of the best traits you can have as a human is to ask questions all the time, of yourself, of others, of things that are established or whatever. So so I'm a big fan of that. And then the other one, which would be probably all the way down the other end of the spectrum, is just personal finance. Mm-hmm. To me, it blows my mind away that we, I don't know if it's the case today, but when I was at school, you'd study geography and history, and it's not to diminish those things or their importance, but in terms of relevance for most people, you don't need it, not at that point in time. But everybody has to go through life's journey post school, running their personal finances, understanding a budget, or understanding just the most simplistic stuff like don't get a credit card. Borrowing money at that rate of interest is a highly punitive thing to do, and it can entrap you for life in financial servitude. So really simple stuff. I reckon it would be nice that was taught in schools.
Awesome. All right, Ollie.
Yes.
We'd like to bring you in now. Now, you and Rusty have been mates for a long time, I believe.
We've been in each other's worlds, yeah.
Even though he went to Christchurch.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay. You're safe here, Ollie.
Thank you.
So actually, Ollie, could you tell us a little bit about, I believe it's Wondership Entertainment, and how that's your two worlds have kind of collided with this amazing historical event.
The due diligence that Rusty did on you before this partnership?
I don't know, actually. You have to ask you.
Sweeping, DD. Sweeping.
So Wondership is a new company that we've set up to execute on a great project that Russell brought to me, in effect. So I'm an actor. I studied at drama school in Sydney many years ago at NIDA, and came through that. And I've been in that whole world, in the performing arts world, my whole life. And part of the frustration of being an actor, in one sense, for me, was wanting more control around my ability to get work. So that's the hardest part of being an actor, is gainful employment. And so you kind of look outside of the typical pathways of auditioning and other things like that. And so it really just leads you into business and entrepreneurship, actually. And so part of all of that was to, over a long, long period of time, looking at what I thought was wrong in the industry and how I wanted to try to change that was, and I've done it before with other companies, is to set up production companies to produce things and make things happen. And so Wondership is sort of a new iteration of that much larger goal that I've got, and a journey that I've been on still for the last 20 years.
So yeah, it's a notoriously challenging business, isn't it?
Yes.
And what with Wondership Entertainment do you guys want to do that's a bit different than say the other production companies that you've
Well,
been
Rusty is
involved
the
with?
yin to my yang. Bringing in not private equity in terms of money in that way, but that way of thinking.
Yeah.
So all of the beautiful things that Rusty was saying, that is, I don't want to be rude, but in essence, it's kind of devoid from our industry a little bit. And so I think fresh thinking, fresh capital, I probably will get political for a second, but we're quite entrenched in a government-funded system in this country. That makes a lot of projects happen, and it also stops a lot of projects from happening. And so you mentioned early on at the beginning of this was the idea of the entrepreneurship spirit and the spirit of risk investment and other things like that are in WA. And I think one of the benefits of growing up in that environment was seeing, captains of industry, how they did it, and me looking at these, my parents' friends and others thinking, God, how did you do this? And the risks that they took and the returns that they had. And that spirit is just around us here in WA, in Perth. And I kind of wanted my bit of that too. And so I think Wondership is really quite unique.
Okay.
It's interesting because I think if I can boldly assume what draws Oli to me, but I think perhaps what draws us to each other is the difference that one another brings.
Yeah.
So, Oli's attraction, obviously, perhaps some of those sort of commercial lenses or thinkings that I might be able to bring, and my team, help me with, even with this. But what attracted me to Oli was like, it's the other thing, it's the ability that he has in the humanities and the arts, and I have a great love and respect for art and creativity, and so I'm attracted to that. But I guess on top of that, a big piece of being able to say like Oli, if you can make commercial things work in that space, then like I was sort of talking about the punter or the gambler in horses, if you do that professionally, well, I got a huge amount of time for you because that's really, really difficult. So so
it's wonderful to feel supported and knowing that you have people that you can lean on who are experts in that sort of capital raising area, or even just the psychology of that when it comes to approaching people for a further investment or development and other things, just to know that there's, for want of a better word, just creative capital, isn't it? That's the thing. There's really, the guys at Nero are quite incredible. They're very open, and I just feel like there's a really great collaboration already. So it feels amazing, and I think it is very powerful.
Well, we need to get on to while we're all here, really, and it's this Operation Jaywick and what's going to come of that.
So Oli and I had been sort of catching up. We've been mates for a long, long time, and Oli had sort of said, "Hey, could I catch you for a beer and pick your brain on a few things," as he said. And so we'd been talking and going through a bunch of different questions that Oli had and ideas, and then I sort of obviously had that in the back of my mind and knew where he wanted to head. And then serendipitously, I was up in Exmouth with the family. It was a windy day, as I'm sure you've seen plenty of.
Yep.
So took the kids to the Discovery Centre, great facility, and it's got this wonderful sort of history centre, if you like, for Exmouth. It's one of the youngest, if not the youngest town in Western Australia that I'm aware of. And so it steps you through the history of Exmouth, through Aboriginal history and some just wonderful stuff. And then sort of the first colonised sort of activities, I suppose, if you like, being Operation Jaywick and some of the stuff that they got up to from there. And, this was pretty much uninhabited. It was, even I think from Aboriginal times, a lot of nomadic movement through there, but it's very hostile. Like Exmouth is
through summer, it can be incredibly hot,
unbelievable. Like you can't work on a building site without a camelback, like water supply. Like how you would traverse, that terrain in that heat, and there is just no water. It is genuinely desert. Meets the aquarium. I think it's one of the most fascinating places on earth, and so with that context, reading about Operation Jaywick and what those guys did, and launching from Exmouth in those conditions, but then the conditions they went through all the way through the journey, and this was like months long mission, thousands of kilometres behind enemy lines. It was just mind-blowing, like blew my mind apart. And then
can you set the scene for what this was like as far as the war timing was? And
do you want me to? Yeah. So there's a guy called Ivan Lyon who was a British soldier. He was a Gordon Highlander. He's a very experienced soldier, but he was kind of a left-brain thinker. He really wasn't part of the establishment there. And for a long time, there was a group of guys that were part of the SOE, which was sort of a precursor to the SAS, if you like, but the European version. And they were part of MI6 and other things like that. They were warning that Singapore was going to fall, but the establishment didn't agree. They didn't listen to them, and all the guns were sort of facing the wrong way. And so when the fall of Singapore came in, the Japanese came through the jungle and took it over in a matter of weeks. And Ivan Lyon and a bunch of other guys had to escape, and that whole escape will be in the first episode. And it's an incredible thing. That is a whole movie unto itself. Ivan and a bunch of others managed to get like a junk boat, and it took them 5 or 6 weeks to get across to India. They got gunned several times. People had incredibly difficult just to get to India. But as Ivan was escaping, he bumped into a guy called Bill Reynolds. And what Bill had done is taken a Japanese fishing junk, and he had managed to bring out over 1,500 civilians out of Singapore on this Japanese fishing boat, pretending to be Japanese. And so Ivan and Bill kind of connected, and he was an Aussie guy. They sort of had that initial thought that if you can get out of Singapore, well, then you can get back in. And so they get over to India. They find some other guys over there who's supporting them, and they literally dressed as Japanese fishermen. And the boat, then it went up and it got to Exmouth, and they had some problems in Exmouth. They had to put a new engine together and all that sort of thing. Anyway, it arrived, they got it all done, and they left from Exmouth, and they travelled over 2,000 kilometres up into the islands off of Singapore. And from there, 3 canoes with 2 blokes in it each spent, I think, nearly 2 weeks getting into Singapore harbour. And they put limpet mines on 7 of the ships.
Almost like magnetised, do they,
Yeah.
to the hull or something?
Yeah, and there's an incredible image which you'd like to get in there of a maritime seaman, a Japanese guy, who was just having a cigarette in the porthole. And they went doof with the limpet mine, and he kind of opens the thing to look what was going on, and they're underneath in these canoes, and they didn't get caught. And so they put the limpet mines on, and in effect they blew up like 35,000 tons of shipping. And so it was at the time, and then they left completely undetected. They came back to Australia. They had one party where they went, "Well done, chaps," and they couldn't say anything about it to anyone.
Was it 7 vessels that they destroyed?
Yeah.
It was a big number. And so, look, when
Absolutely
I first read
amazing.
about it, I only read a fragment of the story. And I text Oli and I said, "Mate, I've just read this story. I won't spoil the end," because I read it in the museum, if you like, in Exmouth, and I cried at the end. And then I text Oli and I was like, "Mate, you've got to, this thing's mental. We've got to tell this story. This is mind blowing." And Oli then picked it up and said, "I really think there's something in this." And then since then, he and Shay have done just a tremendous amount of work and really blown my mind even further with the breadth of the tale here and the people involved and what they went through. And and I know, speaking to some of the guys who are very close with the SAS, that a lot of the SAS guys know this story well and have mad respect for it, because the mission length, not just the depth of the mission, the challenge of the mission and the risk, but the length is psychotic. Like, it's impossible to fathom how long these guys were away and at this. You know, what do you do for food, sanitation? You know, there's no mosquito repellent, there's no sun cream, like the basics of basics, and they're up through the Indonesian archipelago. And as Oli said, had this phenomenally successful mission against every probability.
Like, it'd be almost hard to survive that, regardless of even doing a military exercise.
It was so unbelievable that the Japanese refused to believe that it could have happened the way it actually happened. So, and perhaps you can elaborate on
that. It's not great. The Japanese went mental, basically. There's an event called the Double 10, and it was basically a massacre. And so they just tortured everybody, and
this is in Singapore.
In Singapore, yeah. Wanting to try and find out who the hell did it, you know.
So they thought it had to be, in their mind, it had to be done within Singapore. No one could have possibly come that deep behind their lines.
Yeah. And it was just on the canoes. It wasn't those single man submarines, was that?
Yeah, so you've seen it. You've seen, so this is the greatest thing, right, about it, and why I think.
So how far did they?
Well, this is why we decided to do, a series as opposed to a movie, because the story is very long, and there's a beautiful sort of setup here for a first series and then a second series. And the first mission is so successful, it blows everyone's minds, and then the Japanese are just punitive. What they do is horrific. And there's debate about whether or not the mission was in fact successful, in the sense that, okay, you knocked some ships out and you rattled their cage, but look at what else happened as a result. Now, that's a philosophical thing to explore perhaps in a class. But yeah, they come back and the same guys, despite knowing the odds, go and lead a second mission. And that's where they use the mechanized canoes, and that has a very different outcome. And that's why I ended up crying when I read the story, because these guys are so recklessly brave. Like, it is mind-blowingly brave, what they did. And they didn't just do it once. I went back for a second bite at the cherry, knowing how much more alert these guys are to the risk of this now happening, and ultimately it cost their lives. So this sounds like it's going to be a big dramatic production. To do this justice,
yes,
this is big, right?
Correct.
Well, so this is pretty audacious. I mean, as audacious as that was, sounds even more audacious to put this on the big screen and tell this story. Yeah, how are you going to do that?
With lots of money. It's estimated to be 40 million maybe to execute on that series. And you have to rebuild Singapore. You have to blow up boats.
Where are you going to do that?
We don't know exactly, but there are sound stages around the world, and it depends on the deal structuring that you get at the time, as to where you do it and the infrastructure that's available.
So part of the journey for us, and we're very openly walking the path, right? Like, we don't have all the answers. So walking that path now, it's about me understanding that framework, which Oli and his team and Shay, really do understand, and then perhaps applying some of the, concepts and disciplines that we use in finance and investment to that landscape. And so, when Oli puts a number out there like 40 million, it's a big number, right? Like, and maybe it's that, but the point is, you don't have to fund all of that.
No.
There are groups that are purpose built to fund that. It's about how you get to that place of funding, and you do it in an incredible manner that they want to get behind it. So so that's where we're.
Yeah, and you mentioned Shay Walsh too, who's like going to be writing a lot of this stuff. Is that right? Or
Shay is lots of things actually. He's an incredible graphic designer as well as a great writer. And he's also working as an EP. But Shay will be, but most of these series will end up being rewritten and written by many people in rooms and all sorts of things, depending on the outcomes that you're going for. But very rarely would you have a series written by one rider like this.
I think for
Of this
yeah,
scale.
it's an interesting piece, right? Because creative control, which is kind of an oxymoron in itself, but you know, there's some important things here, and if we look at it, you know, what motivates us, there's a financial discipline to it. I'm not here because I'm motivated to make money out of it, but I want to see that as a part of it. So I think it just brings good discipline. And to that end, you know, one of the things we've been talking about a lot internally is like, hey, sourcing capital is one thing, but the marriage of capital is more important than the quantum. So it's not just about first past the post, find that capital and lock it in. It's actually about finding the capital that understands your journey really, really well and marrying that capital, because that then allows you to have more, I guess, discipline around your creative control, if that makes sense. So a big thing for us is we want to see the story told accurately. We want to see a proper representation of what occurred, and you know, and you know, I would love to see the state of Western Australia and you know, some of the geographical parts of the state up in the big screen. I think it's, I'm such a proud desert kid. You know, I really reckon as a West Australian, we're all kind of desert kids, even if you live in Perth or the southwest. It's a desert state, and the hostility of the desert here and the beauty are just amazing. And you know, I hope we can frame some of that. And as well as that, you know, I think there's a very natural connection to Indonesia and Singapore and the like. That whole realm of Southeast Asia, they're our closest, dearest and nearest neighbours. And yeah, so hope it...
So this story is big in its nature. It's also big geographically. It goes to 3 major places. And also as a story, it lends itself to international scalability. So although it's a big number, it's also very interesting, and it's advantageous that with the streamers as they are, some of the bigger ones obviously, they are looking for international tentpole projects that will resonate with a large audience, and this is an incredible story that will do that.
Just wondering, how do you think it would translate to like the Japanese market? Have you considered? Because I always wonder that in you know, these kind of war movies where someone's the bad guy.
So we're working with a company called Volpix, which is a UK production company. There's an Emmy-nominated writer, Justin, who is working with us now already on this story. And so his largest feedback point was a multiple POV. So you must have multiple points of view. So we meet very early on a lady called Elizabeth Choi, who was one of the heroines in Singapore, who helped with the resistance. And ideally, season 2 might follow her journey a bit as well. But in that, there's also a concept that we're looking at the moment of a Japanese soldier, and we follow a Japanese soldier. And there was this incredible image that Shay talked about of the Japanese soldiers in the prison and other places being very kind to children, incredibly brutal to their parents. And there was a story about a Japanese soldier who came up to a guy who was lying on the ground, and the officer in charge said, "Go and shoot him. You got to get rid of him." And he went over to him and purposefully shot next to his head, and then dropped his water bottle and left, and said that he'd shot him, but he didn't in fact shoot him. And so there was a concept that we came up with, and we're still very much working on it, is the idea that we see the turning of that soldier, and we see what war does. And in the prison system, we follow his journey to a point where he actually potentially executes somebody or worse. And so I think we have to be very conscious more broadly about the futility of war and the human experience and what it does to all of us. I mean, Ivan Lyon was not immune to being an arsehole, and he was willing to shoot all of the guys on the boat. They'd agreed to do that. They all had cyanide pills, but they said if they were going to be captured, then they were going to go and shoot them. And he already had done that with a whole lot of Japanese people. He had a massive big lion tattoo right on his chest. So he was a badass, yeah. And I think it's important to show. He was also incredibly not suspicious. What's the word? Oh my Lord, sorry. I can't remember her name.
Superstitious.
Superstitious. Bloody hell! Thank you so much. And so he was incredibly tough on his crew as well. And so we need to show all of that.
Yeah,
I mean, these kids, there were 17-year-olds on that boat. Ivan was 28 when he died. Those kids were not even told where they were going until they left Exmouth. They didn't even know. So it's hard for us kind of snowflakes, if you like, to even conceptualize some of the things that they were doing, and also the license that they had within which to do it.
It's a fascinating area, right? It's very hard to, and I think it's very important not to be black and white about wrong and right. The framework of war is very hard to understand unless I think you've been through one. I think we're all guessing, and so for us and for the guys that are doing all the real work, not me, but it's important to provide points of view and context to decision making, and that doesn't mean people weren't offensively brutal. They were, but there may have been context to that. And even some of the series now, like I think Netflix has a great series called Shogun. I don't know if you guys have seen
I watched it. Yeah,
it's so good, right?
it's amazing.
It's amazing. But
actually, I read the book after someone who recommended that. Someone on the podcast recommended
cool
Shogun.
I think if you watch it as a Westerner, you look at these concepts and you're like, that can't be real. Like,
I know.
they didn't just voluntarily commit suicide on a regular basis, surely, but they did. And so, I think when you look at the Japanese, and it's a great question, will the Japanese like the depiction? And I don't think we have the answer to that until it's done, but their cultural learnings, which are over hundreds and thousands of years, it's a very ancient culture. They're things that we struggle to comprehend, I think. And so there's context even to what may look like the most egregious behaviours from our point of view.
And it's a culture that changed their tune very quickly after the end of World War II as well.
Yeah, and a really interesting question is how much of that culture perhaps still, are there things that are within the culture that we don't see that are still there and in and around?
Yeah, for such an old culture, you think how can it
really
change so quickly?
Yeah, exactly. It's a fascinating thing. I mean, I think we were talking before the show about shared experiences up in Japan. I love the place. I have a place up there. I go up there every year. My mum speaks Japanese. She actually did an exchange student program.
Yeah, I did as well. Yeah.
Oh, did you?
I speak a bit of Japanese.
Amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think mum did it in like the 70s.
Yeah, it's a great thing to do. I'm trying to get it happening with my kids as well, just to maybe find a place to go over and stay when we
100%. I mean, I love it. And you can understand, it's very interesting where the line between culture and racism sits. And they have such strong sense of culture that you could almost interpret it as racism. But these are complex philosophical conversations.
Yeah.
But Japan is just a fascinating place, an amazing people. I love being there, and every time I go, and yet I only understand like the absolute surface.
And I think in this story, it's going to be tough to capture all the complexity of that, I guess. I mean, ultimately, you're sort of telling a heroic tale, aren't you, about these soldiers? But
we mentioned AI before. Now Netflix has said, the CEO said, if you're not using AI to develop your stories, then you're probably not going to get very far.
Really?
And the head of the ABC just said, if you don't have AI statistics on your material, we won't fund it.
Wow.
So we're really interestingly meeting the whole other side of it. When we kind of intuitively look at the human condition, the streamers are going, yeah, but what's the data? And so, back to you, well, we'll leave it up to AI to figure out.
yeah, that's right.
No, we won't. But do you know what I mean? Yes, is it difficult to capture? Yes, but there is an intuitive capability that you will be able to do it. And there was a great quote from the guy that did Terminator,
James Cameron.
James Cameron. He said, it's not right until it's right. And it's just such a blunt statement, but it's always sat with me, and it's not right until it's right. Now, that's sort of easy when you've got 300 million to play with for a film, but I also think it's important at any stage of the iteration that you sit with that, and that's something that we are very, very, very vigilant on, because part of the capital equation is a little bit more time and resource, and part of that has to go into the development of the story, and it's one of the things I believe is missing in a lot of our Australian content, that it's underdeveloped, and we're not matching the scalability or the development money isn't there to match international capability. And so it's something that I'm very conscious about, is making sure that it's in development and very, very, very well written.
That's something Oli's pushed incredibly hard, and the amount of lemon juice these guys squeeze out of the dollar lemon is mind blowing. I don't get anywhere near out of the kind of hours that the guys get out of the people in this industry in mind. But
if I can just pick up on that, it's an interesting comment, because we're not, we've got a good friend of ours who's doing some strategy stuff with us, and he said, you don't realize you're already in development. And it was a question, I was like, what do you mean we're already? Okay, we've started the journey. But he's like, yeah, but where you already have gotten to in the sense of matching capital to this project already is unfortunately already so much further than most people will ever get to on a project. And I remember Rusty just talking about, it's, don't quote me, like 50 million or something to drill out a mine.
Yeah.
And then it's another 230 or more million to make a gold mine. And in our world, we have to look at that too and say, well, it costs money to actually get to a certain level where it's actually a gold mine.
So you need to ask Rusty for some back pay, I think.
No, I don't mean it that way. I just mean, but before
all
that,
those meetings that you've had.
No. No, but we're just so inspired to do it, because it's an incredible opportunity for us to.
Do you have to have a timeline then of how things are working?
I was going to ask that. Is there sort of, like you said, if you've got money and resources, I'm assuming that can extend your timeline so you can take more careful thought to get it right, as you say.
Yeah.
But then there's also portions where it's action stations, isn't it? Like where you've got to...
It will become that way, and that's where you have to be very vigilant that you keep it in development until you're kind of ready. But yes, that is a luxurious position. Often what will happen without... I don't even understand exactly the budgets for most films, because they're all pieced together differently. But often... if you think of a pie and you own the pie in the beginning, well, because of your equity, you don't have any leverage in the game. You have to give away so much of your stake in that pie very early on just to get it made. And so the more you can retain that sense of control, that equity and other things, then the more you're in. And as Rusty very well pointed out, it's the quality of capital that we're looking for. Because for me, this is a long play, and it's something that if we're going to execute on a project like this, which will be one of, if not the largest project that would have come out of WA. So
you imagine the filming process will be multiple years?
No, it's not. No, it can't be.
For multiple
way
seasons?
Too expensive. Well, you do it episode by episode, obviously, but season by season, depending. But no, you go into a window, so it's the production period itself is probably 1/3 of the process. Where we're at now could go on for years, but it won't. But typically, a film can take 5 years or more. I think Danger Close was in 15 years.
Yeah. So this is sort of the foundations of the house. So it's putting down the formwork and the concrete to make sure you've got a really strong platform to then erect the rest of the building from. And you can do that in pretty quick time, so long as you get that foundation right and that planning right. So that's the piece we're doing at the moment. And we're not going to go and put a single plank into the building until we're really, really confident and comfortable with the foundations. And and I think to Oli's point, unfortunately, a lot of people don't even get to really pour the conch. They have an idea and a thread, but then it gets diluted and pulled in different directions because they're so subservient to capital. That's something
by the time they get to the end, it's
not
transformed
exactly.
so much that,
or it doesn't even get there. And so so we're working very, very hard on getting the platform really, really polished and well advanced. Far, I guess, beyond where perhaps a lot of these things sort of
often go
from.
It's the general indictment of my industry is I call them the pity party, but it's this sort of poverty mentality. So we come back to this notion of financial education and literacy. So much of our capability as an artist comes down to our ability to be able to execute on those ideas. And so I think, our industry just the quality of capital isn't there. We're just rushing to try and get anything going. We don't really know how to do it exactly. That's not everyone. I don't mean this by any means, but there's so many incredible ideas, but just the piece that's missing is the execution piece, the education around that. And it's one thing that in my other business, in our education business, we talk about financial literacy and how do you create an environment for yourself so that you can be creative and execute on that. So it's wonderful just to be working with someone like Nero and Rusty that have a level of sophistication.
Well, it must be nice to do something that's like a creative outlet for your investment as opposed to all these mining.
Yeah, I love it. Like, I mean,
is this your first foray into
film and that sort of thing? Yeah, I mean, my wife's an artist, so been really lucky to share her journey, and we worked collaboratively as a team from the day she sort of started.
What kind of artist is she?
She's an abstract painter,
right?
And but she does that within a company that we own, and so yeah, I've sort of tried my best to add some value in the commercial sort of parts to that equation.
Yep.
And so I've been lucky enough to have that in my life, and I love creativity, and I think it's an underrated element to building businesses and investing in them, for that matter. So for me, it's certainly interesting, stimulating. I enjoy applying some of the things that I guess I do to it, and like, it's good because it's not overwhelming. I'm not being asked to become a doyen of Oli's industry. I'm there to help him to add value.
Make it feasible.
Yeah, just to add value where I'm naturally able to, and then let him do what he does and Shay does and the team to really run the business and drive the business forward. So it works well. It's not onerous on me in that respect. In fact,
it's probably quite exciting, I imagine, compared to...
Well, there's a lot of benefit, right? Like, so... cross-pollination, I think, so underrated. You get really, as you get older, you get really myopic. And particularly for what I do, I'm an investor in one sector, and I just, that's what I do, and I just keep doing that. And it's really easy to not, have the blinkers off. And so it's good to take them off, see something different. And without question, I think there'll be learnings for me that I'll take away from this process and the light that I can utilise in my own world as well. So, and
you might get an extra role in the show as well. Is that the main goal?
Yeah, absolutely. Have to audition, obviously.
No, I'm not sure.
That's the real reason that you're raising this 40 million, is it?
Mate, I'm happy to sign a document that says I never attend a celebrity party or anything like that if that's required. I just want to see an amazing production put up, something that I think every West Australian should know about and be really proud about, because it is a formative piece of the journey, I think, for the SAS. And I think, the role the SAS plays and the work that military personnel do is at times underrated, particularly during times of peace. And we've got them right here on our doorstep. Exactly, they're right here in Swanbourne. So they're your neighbours. It's the reason they have such a low crime rate around here. But look, I think it is easy to, and again to the point about context, right? When you asked the question about the Japanese and point of view, we've had a really interesting debate in the public domain recently on the SAS and some of the things that have been going on there. And I think it's an important conversation before casting stones too hard. First of all, to acknowledge the truth or the realities of whatever happened, but also to say, hey, there's context. We're asking our fellow human beings, our friends, our relatives in many instances, to go and do these things. We're actually asking people to do things that you and I would not do. And I think there's an incredible lack of respect to that sometimes
There's no one,
in
you
the
can't,
discourse.
You can't comprehend it. I've got a friend who's ex-SAS, and we talk about this all the time, that all that stuff impacted them so badly. And
For life.
yeah.
You give it's your life.
Yep.
And you're doing it from the age of, 20 odd?
Yeah.
So, and it is the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not trying to excuse certain things. I'm just saying that I think there's an important conversation about context and maybe asking about how do we better help people who are willing to do these things for the rest of us, in managing what is a very, I can't even comprehend how to manage those situations.
Yeah. So is that going to be one of the themes that are going through? Are you at that stage in the writing, or?
We're very much looking at the character motivation of Ivan. What is it that drives him? And I think courage and determination. And
because if we're talking about this being the instigation of SAS, you'd have to think there'd be some initial values there, I guess.
I think there are, absolutely. I think there are. He didn't know that it was going to be the beginning of the SAS, and it wasn't directly. I mean, it was. I think it gave gumption to the notion of these kind of missions and that type of military unit. But yes, you definitely need to have a look at what drives them and why that's important and how it relates to today. My question always is, what would you do if they came down the street? I think we've all got something in us.
For sure.
This Ivan sounds like a pretty tough customer.
Yeah.
Who are you going to get to play him?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. What are you up to?
Do I get a role? Do I get
Well, it's a very good question. So,
Present company excluded, obviously.
Obviously a great actor, blah, blah, blah. But you need somebody that, in essence, carries the project forward from a marketing and financing point of view and all of those sort of things. So they're very strategic placements, and often they will get the project funded because they're kind of a major de-risking event when you get a big showrunner on board, which is where we're up to at the moment, and then which is a sort of a creative executive, if you like, with credits, and then obviously you would go through to the lead actors or a lead director, somebody like that. So
let's not forget that Oliver is an actor.
I am an actor,
and let's also not forget that Tarantino did a remarkable job in Reservoir Dogs. So, mate,
totally. I've already picked my guy.
All right, Rusty, Ollie, all the best with this project and Wondership Entertainment and telling this amazing story. We're really lucky to have you on the show. Thanks for coming into the Range Project.
Can't wait to watch.
Stoked.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, as a former student, I'm so proud and stoked to see what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome. It's school's come a long way since I was here. It's awesome.
I asked Mum and Dad if I can go to Scotch. They just wouldn't let me. So.
Good that you disclosed that at the end. You've made up for your church sins.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much,
Thanks,
Chance.
Thanks,
Thank you.